guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am finally filming a very requested video, and one I also promised quite a few months back now. That's right, today I'm going to be chatting through my top 10 favorite YA fantasy series. I have been reading YA fantasy for the bulk of my life, and honestly cutting this list down to a top 10 was incredibly difficult, and I had to leave quite a few faves of mine off this list. So keep that in mind when you watch it. There might be a few omissions that might surprise you. With that in mind, this list is in no particular order, as just getting to a top 10 was difficult enough for me. That being said, I love every single book present on this list today. Every single series to me is absolutely incredible, top tier. A lot of them, in my opinion, are also criminally underrated. So hopefully you guys get some new book recs from this video. Of course, I would love to hear about some of your favorites down in the comments below, but without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the top 10 list. Starting with probably one of my all-time favorite authors, and an author just in general that got me into this particular genre itself way back in the day, and that is Cinda Williams' Chima. I have two of her series here to talk about because they are directly connected to each other. First, the Seven Realms series, and then the Shattered Realms series. And oh my goodness, Cinda Williams' Chima is probably one of my most read authors. I have read so many of her books. I have a whole shelf almost dedicated to her works entirely. In my opinion, she just makes some of the best multi-POV high fantasy stories out there in the YA genre. Her cast of characters are so easy to fall in love with. Her world building and magic systems, in my opinion, are incredibly engaging and super interesting. I specifically wanted to highlight these two series as they are my favorite within her works, and again, they are directly connected. You cannot read the Shattered Realms, in my opinion, without first reading the Seven Realms series. Specifically, the Seven Realms series is a multi-POV high fantasy YA story following two primary main characters. One, Han Alistair, also known as Cuff Alistair, who is a street thief lord who has had these magical cuffs on his wrists for as long as he can remember. And we also follow Reza Anna Maria, who is the crown princess and heir to the Fells Kingdom. Their lives and destinies begin to intertwine as a magical plot is basically underway to overthrow Reza's family. This has so many twists and turns. Again, I feel like Cinda Williams' Chima throughout both of her series does such a great job creating disparate character storylines and bringing them together in really satisfying ways. Just like a really classic, large, multi-POV story with lots of politics, angst, romance, everything you could possibly want. I love these two series so much. They will live in my heart forever. Excellent, top tier YA fantasy. From there, I wanted to feature a very hyped and very popular book, because I know a lot of you guys would definitely agree, and that is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. I just think everything about the story, characters, the setting just creates a really gripping, dramatic YA fantasy tale that you're not going to want to put down. It has a dark fantasy setting inspired by both Dutch and Venetian kind of merchant trader politics, and this is another excellent multi-POV story. In fact, we follow 6 different characters as each one is working together to pull off the most impossible heist that this world has ever seen. A classic and perfectly executed dark heist focused story with so many interesting twists and turns, and just a group of characters you will immediately fall in love with. This just has all of the trappings of a perfect YA fantasy story, in my opinion. A gripping dark setting, a group of ragtag individuals kind of brought together due to some unusual circumstances, assassins, backdoor dealings, and great and intriguing politics that will keep you flipping the pages. This is a dark YA duology you definitely do not want to miss, and I mean, who doesn't love a good heist story? And in my opinion, Leigh Bardugo creates a fantastic one. Next up, I have the Three Dark Crowns series by Kendare Blake, another wonderfully dark YA fantasy series that I personally think is just excellent. This has so many different plot elements that for me just work so well, and one of them is just the creativity and just the idea of this book like will make you just want to pick it up immediately. Essentially, this is a story set on a remote island that is ruled by a matriarchy. Every generation, the queen gives birth to triplets. Each daughter is born with a different type of magic, which then associates them with a different political group on the island who are all vying for power. At the beginning of this story, we follow 3 sisters who have been raised apart: Mirabella, who is a powerful elemental magic user, Catherine, who can create and also consume the deadliest of poisons, and lastly Arsene, who is a naturalist who's able to connect with both nature and animals. These 3 sisters have been raised apart and kind of brought into their power throughout their childhood, because when these girls come to age, they have to enter a competition and essentially kill off the other two sisters to take the crown and have the power on this island. This series is excellent for so many different reasons. For one, the writing style is excellent. It creates the dark ambiance that you would want in this story. It has such a creepy atmospheric quality to it that makes you not want to put it down. But ultimately, my favorite part of this is the sisters. You shift through all of their different perspectives, and each one is obviously gripping with the reality of having to kill their other two sisters in different ways throughout this entire series. It is intense. This is not a series that kind of uses that as an opening conflict for later things throughout the series. No, these three sisters having been raised to kill each other is the central conflict throughout all 4 books, and it's so gripping and will keep you guessing, I guarantee. Not to mention, Kendare Blake expertly weaves other things like friendship and romance throughout this tale as well. It's dark, it's incredible. I would recommend this series so much. Definitely one of my all-time faves. Next 2 series I'm going to chat about are 2 that I definitely think are very underrated and just want everyone to read. The first one being the Queen's Thief series by Megan Wallen Turner. To me, this is one of the most clever, well-scaled YA fantasy series out there. It's inspired by ancient Greece and really uses a lot of the history and mythology from this time period and embeds it throughout the story. On top of that, the cast of characters are so clever, particularly the thief character within this series is one that, in my opinion, will trick you left and right. I always felt like with each book, the plot not only catches you by surprise, but is constantly trying to trick you in a really satisfying way. And I also feel like it really nods to this sort of thief trope really well. And if you love a heist story, this is definitely a series to check out. Again, this is definitely a fantasy world that builds over time. The first one is definitely more insular in its scope, and we really just focus on our main character, the thief, as he essentially makes a bargain to get out of prison to steal an impossible object for the crown. We follow him on this journey to retrieve this object, and along the way we learn about the politics of the world as well as mythology through storytelling. This just really combines a lot of classic fantasy tropes, quests to thieves to battling kingdoms. Please do not interpret that to mean that this is boring. It has such a rich political landscape and is so twisty and turny. I can guarantee this series will catch you by surprise, not only with its characters, but with its plot as well. It's so good. Next is, in my opinion, one of the most emotional YA series out there, and that is the Lumetri Chronicles by Melina Marchetta. Melina Marchetta normally writes contemporary, but she departed from that and actually wrote, in my opinion, one of the best YA fantasy trilogies out there. And one of the reasons why I feel like this particular series is so unbelievably impactful is that she writes such complex and dynamic characters throughout this trilogy. And in fact, each book within the trilogy hyper focuses on a different character, and there are a bit of time skips, but everyone is definitely connected. And the overall storyline and thread continues to persist through time, but it's definitely a very character-focused fantasy story that will leave you just broken into a million pieces, but also just truly one of the most beautiful YA fantasy trilogies. In this first one, we follow our main character Finnegan, who 10 years ago fled his homeland of Lumetri with thousands of others after an imposter seized the throne, killed the entire royal family, and used dark magic to basically close the borders and trap almost everyone else inside. Finnegan and many others were able to escape, but for the past 10 years, roaming other kingdoms as refugees. However, one day, Finnegan essentially runs into a young woman who claims that the prince is actually still alive, and he essentially begins a quest with her to not only locate this lost prince, but also to bring the citizens of Lumetri home. This is such an emotional story for so many different reasons. Again, the storyline expands throughout the entire trilogy, but this is so much about humanity and generational pain. Seriously, a story that will kick you right in the heart and right in the gut and will just leave an impact. I love this trilogy so much. It has stayed with me since I read it many years ago and will always be a longtime fave of mine. The next series that's on my list is, in my opinion, a must read, and that is the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. I would say there could be some debate if this is considered YA or more of a children's story, but I think we can all agree on that it is definitely, at least in my opinion, a classic. When I encountered this series for the first time growing up, it is no small thing to say that this series absolutely boggled my mind in every way, shape, and form. I had never really encountered such a fully realized fantastical experience, and it just is amazing, and definitely a series I personally want to reread soon. But if you're not familiar or haven't had a chance to pick up the His Dark Materials series, the first one is The Golden Compass and follows our main character Lyra. And in this first novel, I would definitely say it's very much a coming of age story following Lyra as she essentially goes on a quest and an adventure to save her very good friend. Throughout this quest, she basically has to confront and realize that the people that she thought she could trust are not quite that, and the people that she's been pushing away are actually the ones that she can seek refuge with. Throughout the story, we learn about the magic of daemons, which are essentially animal companions that are a bit more than that, as well as Lyra is entrusted with a special artifact called the Golden Compass, which a lot of powerful people in the government are after as well. This is a sweeping fantastical tale that really escalates throughout the entire trilogy, and in my opinion gets very, very dark and actually takes quite a bit of turns that I guarantee you will not expect. In this first one, I feel like we encounter a richly captured fantastical world that is really transportive and will sweep you away. And just in general, I feel like the His Dark Materials series really, really holds up, and there are so many adaptations of these books out in the world. Some of them not great, some of them really amazing, but I would definitely recommend still actually checking out the trilogy itself. Again, this is one I personally want to reread, but it's like so foundational, so classic. His Dark Materials are just like amazing. The next series I have to talk about just recently wrapped up, so a perfect opportunity to binge, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. In my opinion, this is just one of the best angsty, dramatic, magic-filled YA fantasy stories out there. This is a fantasy story inspired by ancient Rome and their military. It is multi-POV, and I'll say throughout the series it definitely builds on each other, and you follow a variety of characters that you'll fall in love with, but our two central main characters are Laia and Elias. Both of these characters live in the Martial Empire, which is a very military and brutal empire that essentially means any act of defiance with death. At the beginning of the story, Leia's brother is arrested for treason, and essentially she makes a deal with a group of rebels to help break him out of prison if she becomes a spy at a very powerful military academy. She agrees and essentially runs into our other main character there, Elias, who is an elite military soldier. Their lives and fates become intertwined. This is definitely a fantasy story that has a very strong central romance. It's very angsty and dramatic, but really you fall in love with their tale and their story. But beyond that, it also has excellent combat and military strategy as a large part of this book as well, and combines kind of human villains with an outside dark evil force and sort of a destiny component. This is one that has wonderful pacing, dramatic moments, and characters you want to root for from page one. An excellent 4-book series that I absolutely flew through. Loved every second of this. So entertaining. The next book is kind of breaking my unspoken rule for this video, as there's only one book out in this series so far, but it was the only YA novel that made my top 2020 books of last year, and it was just such an outstanding introduction to a new fantasy world. I could not include it, basically, is what I'm saying. And that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I talk about this book incessantly on my channel, but for good reason, because this is excellent. This is the first book to a new YA urban fantasy story. In this, we follow our main character Bree, who is recently enrolled into a prestigious high school program on the UNC college campus. She's excited to leave home to escape not only the watchful eye of her father, but also the grief of the recent passing of her mother. However, her first night on campus, she witnesses a magical attack and essentially learns about an Arthurian secret society that has dedicated itself to killing demons around the world. And essentially in discovering this, and begins to question if there might be more to her mother's death than she originally thought. Again, this only has one book out in the series so far, but it is really just that excellent. Bree as a main character is so easy to root for. You love her. There's wonderful romance. The pacing is absolutely wild, and in this story, I feel like Tracy Deonn really subverts a lot of known YA fantasy tropes and really breathes new life into the Knights of the Round Table fantasy setup. I loved this first book so much. Magic, intrigue, family history. There's just so much here. I loved it. I can't wait for book 2 and would highly recommend checking this out. Next is another beautiful, very character-focused YA fantasy trilogy, and that is the Girl of Fire and Thorns series by Rae Carson. This is a story that really is all about the growth of one character through 3 books, and honestly, her journey is beautiful and also one that will just stay with you for a long time. You just can't help but to love her as a main character. Essentially, this is a story where we follow our main character Eliza, and she is the chosen one. However, she really does not view herself that way. She's the second princess and always has been really treated as the spare. She doesn't view herself as very capable or smart, nor has she been really trained for anything that important. Now, on her 16th birthday, she has been secretly married off to a handsome and powerful prince in another kingdom that is in turmoil, and he's a prince and a king who ultimately need her to be great and to fulfill her prophecy and destiny that she has been bestowed since she is a young child. Outside of this marriage, other individuals also view her as a possible powerful political piece that they could use in their own machinations. So much of the story is Alyssa realizing her own power, also escaping situations where other people are trying to use her for their own gains, and instead realizing what she herself wants to accomplish, and ultimately how powerful she really is as an individual. Again, this is a really character-focused fantasy story, really following Alyssa as she kind of grows into herself and into her power. I love this trilogy so much. I feel like it is so human. I also feel like it does quite a few unexpected things within the YA fantasy genre. Definitely very emotionally charged, but the main character is just such a believable and rootable hero. You're not going to want to put this trilogy down. Alrighty guys, we have made it to the end. I'm on my last book recommendation, and that is the Scythe series by Neal Shusterman. This is a fantasy dystopian-esque story that honestly is just an absolute page turner. This is one of the most gruesome, dark YA series out there, and Neal Shusterman, in my opinion, is just one of the best YA writers out there. I feel like he creates worlds that are eerily close to our own in a way that will terrify you to no end. But within this particular series, humanity has essentially reached the point where they can no longer die. They've done away with disease, they've done away with poverty, they've done away with all bad things that have plagued humanity for thousands of years. So in an attempt to keep the population of Earth under control, society has essentially given over the task of death over to individuals called scythes, who are essentially trained to kill. In this story, we follow two scythes in training, Citra and Rowan, and essentially they have to master this art. And in their introduction into this world, they quickly realize that while some scythes are really compassionate and have a lot of heart for the job that they must do, there are many that are actually power hungry and have their own personal agenda. This is a twisty-turvy of a novel. I mean, one that will keep you guessing from page one. It is dark, it is entrancing. A concept of a utopian but more like dystopian-esque society that has done away with all evils that have plagued it previously, and also kind of exploring all the different scythe politics that exists behind the scenes. It is gruesome, it is intriguing, absolutely mind-boggling. Neal Shusterman does it again with this trilogy. I guarantee you will not want to put these books down. So good. Alrighty guys, those are my top 10 favorite YA fantasy series. Please let me know down below some of your favorites, as I would love to know. I'm always adding new books on this bookshelf, so please hit me with your recs. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon.